The city was asleep, drowning in silence except for the distant honking of a night truck and the soft hum of the security lights. Inside the penthouse on the 38th floor, marble floors gleamed under chandeliers and everything smelled faintly of lavender and wealth. But down the dim hallway, past the unused guest rooms and the sleek modern kitchen, a faint light escaped through the barely open door of the utility room. A space too narrow to be called a room, more like a cleaned-out closet where the housemaid, Aisha, kept her few belongings, including a thin mattress on the floor. The rest of the staff had gone home hours ago. It was well past midnight. She was supposed to be asleep. Instead, she was sitting cross-legged on the cold floor, a tattered notebook open in front of her, her fingers moving nervously over equations written in fading pencil. Her lips moved silently, mouthing formulas, reciting definitions, solving problems over and over, as if her life depended on it. And in a way, it did. Aisha was 23, and this job as a live-in maid for the Raheel family, owners of a luxury textile empire, was her only way to feed her ailing father and send her younger brother to school back in the dusty lanes of Bahawalpur. The salary wasn't much, but the job came with food and a roof, and safety. Still, what the world didn't know, what even she was afraid to believe, was that Aisha had a secret dream. Every night, when the world was asleep, she became a student again. Because 5 years ago she had been on track to top her college entrance exams before everything collapsed. Her mother's cancer, the hospital bills, her father's accident, and finally the loan sharks who took everything. That night, as she solved one more math question by the weak light of her phone's torch, its flashlight cracked from too many drops, a voice startled her. "What are you doing here?" She gasped and scrambled to hide her book. But it was too late. Mr. Raheel Khan stood in the doorway, in a charcoal hoodie, barefoot, holding a half-empty glass of water. His hair was slightly damp, and he looked as if he hadn't slept either. Aisha froze. Her eyes widened in panic. I was just cleaning up, sir." She gestured vaguely at nothing. He stepped forward, eyebrows furrowed, eyes glancing, at the notebook and worn-out pen. "At 2 a.m, solving integrals?" Her throat went dry. No lie would work now. So she lowered her eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry, sir." Raheel didn't say anything for a long moment. At 36, he had seen all kinds of people: greedy investors, fake friends, gold diggers, flatterers. But he had never, not once, caught one of his maids secretly studying calculus after a 14-hour shift. "Are you in school?" he finally asked. She shook her head. "Not anymore. I couldn't afford it. I'm just trying to stay sharp, in case I ever get the chance again." Raheel stood quietly, the silence heavy with something unspoken. Then he nodded and walked away without another word. Aisha sat frozen, her pulse pounding. Had she just ruined her only job? Was he going to fire her for being distracted? She couldn't sleep at all that night. But the next morning, everything changed. Raheel's assistant, Mariam, showed up at the door of the staff quarters with a brown envelope. "Mr. Khan asked me to hand this to you," she said coolly. "He said you should open it in private." Inside was an exam registration form for the upcoming National College Entrance Test, fully paid, with her name already typed in bold. Tucked between the sheets was a note scribbled in expensive ink. "Talent like yours doesn't belong in a broom closet." Aisha sat on the floor, eyes filled with tears she didn't want anyone to see. And that was just the beginning of a journey she never imagined. Because what Raheel Khan didn't know either, what would change both their lives forever, was the secret Aisha had kept buried for 5 long years. And when he discovered it, everything, her future, his past, and the meaning of love, kindness, and redemption would change forever. Aisha sat frozen with the envelope on her lap, as if it might disappear if she blinked too hard. The name printed on the form, Aisha Bashir, felt foreign to her, like a version of herself she had buried beneath layers of cleaning rags and late-night regrets. She clutched the paper to her chest, trembling not with fear, but with something she hadn't felt in years: hope. That morning, the staff moved around her like ghosts. The cook grumbled about the missing vinegar, the laundryman complained about Rahil's silk shirts, but Aisha barely heard them. Her eyes kept drifting toward the note, the handwriting etched into her memory. Talent like yours doesn't belong in a broom closet. Who was this man, really? Rahil Khan, the aloof, sharp-tongued billionaire who barely spoke to his staff unless something was out of place. Why would he do this? Why would a man who could buy anything in the world care about a maid's long-lost dream? She found out 3 nights later. It was raining, soft, persistent rain that painted the windows in streaks of sorrow. The city lights looked like broken jewels from the balcony where Rahil stood, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. Aisha had been sent to deliver towels to the guest room. On her way back, she paused when she saw him standing alone. Something in his posture, stooped, hollow, pulled her closer. She didn't mean to speak, but the words escaped before she could stop them. "Thank you, sir, for the form." He didn't turn. For a while she thought he hadn't even heard her. Then he said, "You remind me of someone." A beat of silence. "She was like you, bright, determined. She used to study by candlelight because her parents couldn't afford electricity bills. She wanted to become an engineer." Aisha's throat tightened. What happened to her? Rahil turned, and for the first time she saw something raw in his eyes. Not power, not pride, but pain. "She married me." Aisha's breath caught. He continued, voice low, "And died giving birth to our son, a boy I don't see anymore. His grandparents took him away after the accident, said I was too broken to raise him." His voice didn't crack, but something in Aisha did. She saw the truth behind the sharp suits and the bitter sarcasm. This man was a graveyard in a glass tower. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He met her eyes, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. "Don't be. Just don't waste your mind cleaning floors for the rest of your life." That night, when Aisha returned to her closet room, she cried for a woman she never knew, and for a man who had silently carried too much loss. The next few weeks passed in a blur of routine and revival. Rahil never spoke about the conversation again, but something changed. He started leaving her articles clipped from newspapers. One morning she found a used laptop on her bed, old but functional, with engineering tutorials already bookmarked. And once, just once, she caught him watching her from the corridor as she solved physics problems late at night, a softness in his eyes that vanished the moment he saw her looking. But just as Aisha dared to believe her life was changing, the past came knocking. Her younger brother Saad called one evening, voice shaking. "Appa, the landlord wants us out by next week. He says Baba hasn't paid rent in 2 months. He's threatening to throw everything in the street." Aisha's hands clenched. She had sent almost every rupee she saved. How was this happening? "I'll handle it," she promised, though she had no idea how. She spent the next 3 nights barely sleeping, skipping meals, working overtime for extra pay. Rahil noticed. One morning when she dropped a tray, he looked up from his newspaper and asked, "When was the last time you ate properly?" She opened her mouth to lie but closed it again. Something in his tone made her speak the truth. "My family's about to be evicted. I sent money, but it wasn't enough." He stared at her for a long second, then folded his newspaper. "Come with me." "Sir? Just get in the car." They drove in silence, the luxury car humming softly as the city shifted around them. To her surprise, he didn't take her to an office or a bank, but to her own family's neighborhood, to the cracked blue gate she hadn't seen in over a year. Her brother stood frozen when he saw the car, his eyes wide with fear and awe. Rahil, didn't speak to anyone. He simply walked in, examined the small two-room home, then asked Saad for the landlord's number. 20 minutes later, the rent was not only cleared, but the lease extended for a full year. Paid in advance. Aisha tried to speak, but Raheel stopped her with a look. Now you can study without worrying where they'll sleep. She looked at him, her heart full and breaking at the same time. Why are you doing this? He hesitated, then said softly, because no one did it for the woman I loved, and maybe I can't bring her back, but I can stop one more dream from dying. Aisha didn't say it aloud, but something shifted in her that day. It wasn't just gratitude anymore, it was something deeper, more dangerous. But before she could name it, the world tilted again. Because that night, while organizing old boxes in Raheel's study, she stumbled on a photograph, a wedding photo, faded at the edges, and her hands went cold. The woman in the picture, the woman Raheel had married, the one he had mourned, was someone Aisha recognized. Not from photos, not from Raheel's stories, but from her own past, from a time long buried, from a connection she had prayed no one would ever discover, because Raheel Khan's dead wife had once saved Aisha's life. And that secret, her secret, was about to unravel everything. Aisha stared at the photograph in trembling silence, the dusty corners of the frame biting into her fingers as her eyes locked on the face she thought she'd never see again. Zara. It had been 7 years, but she remembered everything. The soft-spoken university volunteer who used to run night literacy classes in Bahawalpur. The woman who once stood up to a gang of local thugs when they tried to harass Aisha on her way home. Who bandaged her sprained ankle after she fell running. Who slipped her extra pencils, books, and dignity without ever making her feel small. Zara had been a quiet revolution in a crumbling town, changing lives with just her presence. And one of those lives had been Aisha's. She never knew what happened to Zara after she left the village. She never imagined she had married into the kind of wealth Aisha now scrubbed floors for. And now Aisha lived in her old house, wore the apron that once might have been stitched by her hands, and studied at night beneath the same roof Zara had once dreamed in. The truth made her sick with confusion. All this time Raheel had thought he was helping a stranger. But the woman he was trying to save had once been saved by the woman he lost. She placed the frame back slowly, quietly, but her breath came fast. The past wasn't done with her yet. She didn't tell Raheel. She couldn't, not yet. The knowledge felt too big, too tender, but the guilt gnawed at her, and with it came fear, because the closer Raheel got, the more she felt her heart loosening around him. And if he knew the truth, what would he see? A connection? Or a lie she never meant to tell? Still, Raheel was changing. So was she. He had begun joining her during her late-night studies, sometimes just leaning in the doorway with coffee, sometimes testing her with trick questions and laughing when she got them right. The laugh didn't come easily to him. But when it did, it cracked through the shell of sorrow he wore like armor. He opened up in bits and pieces. She learned how Zara had died in childbirth while Raheel was away on a business trip, how the guilt had destroyed him, how he built towers and companies just to keep himself too busy to feel. I thought love made me weak, he said once. But watching you fight for your dreams, it makes me wonder if love is what makes us strong. Aisha didn't know what to say to that. Because every time he looked at her like she mattered, something inside her came dangerously alive. But the world outside their fragile bubble didn't care for tenderness, especially not the kind that bloomed between a billionaire and his maid. The whispers began with the staff, glances, muted giggles. Then came Mariam, his cold, efficient assistant who had always looked at Aisha like she was a stain on the wall. You think he's going to pull you out of your uniform and put a ring on your finger? She sneered one morning, her voice sharp enough to slice. You're nothing but a charity case to him. A guilt project. Aisha didn't reply. She didn't need to. The words already echoed in her own mind late at night. But the seed of doubt planted there began to grow. Then came the worst blow. Aisha's father fell into a coma, a seizure after a week of untreated high blood pressure. She rushed to the hospital, sick with dread, praying he'd live. But when the doctor gave her the bill, her breath caught. It was more than she'd ever seen in one place. Raheel offered to pay, instantly. "It's not even a question," he said. "Just take it." But something inside her snapped. "Why?" she asked, voice breaking. "Why are you doing all this? The exams, the rent, my father's treatment? Why?" He stared at her, eyes dark. "Because I care." "You don't even know me," she cried. "You think you're saving me. But you don't know the first thing about my past." "Then tell me." She hesitated. This was the moment. The truth she had buried was knocking, harder than ever. "What if I told you that? Your wife saved my life once." His face froze. "What?" "Years ago, in Bahawalpur. She taught me, protected me, believed in me. She was the reason I ever dreamed of college in the first place. I didn't know she was your wife, I swear. Not until I saw the photo." Silence stretched, like a wire between them. Raheel's expression didn't change, but his posture did. Stiff, guarded. "So all this time, you've been hiding it?" "No. I didn't know how to say it. I didn't want you to think I came here because of her. I didn't even know where she ended up. I never used her name for anything. But you didn't tell me when you found out." Her voice cracked. "Because I didn't want to ruin this. Whatever this is." He looked away, his jaw clenched. "I need some time." That night, Aisha packed her things, even though no one told her to. She didn't know if Raheel would ever forgive her, or if she deserved to stay. But before she left, she wrote him one final letter. "You didn't just change my life, Raheel. You reminded me that my life was worth changing. But if the truth makes you doubt me, then I'd rather leave than stay and make you question every kindness you ever gave. Just know this. You saved someone who your wife once believed in. Maybe..." "That's not a coincidence. Maybe it's how she's still changing lives. Through you." She left it on his desk, walked out into the night. No job, no security, just the weight of a secret finally told. But she didn't cry, because for the first time in years she wasn't running away from her truth. She was walking straight into it. Aisha stepped into the morning light with her world folded into a single duffel bag and a heart bruised by something she couldn't name. Loss, maybe. Or perhaps a deeper truth. She had begun to love a man who wasn't ready to forgive the ghosts they both carried. The streets felt louder now, less forgiving. Without the Khan estate's quiet order, the city was a constant hum of survival. Aisha found temporary shelter at a small women's hostel, 2 bunk beds crammed into a peeling room, the air thick with damp and the sounds of lives unraveling just like hers. She took up work again, dishwashing in a roadside diner by day, tutoring 3 schoolgirls by night. The money was barely enough, but her mind stayed sharp, determined. If she couldn't stay in Raheel's world, she would still fight for the one he inspired her to build. She submitted her engineering entrance forms 2 days later, using the savings she'd quietly stashed away. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Yet every night, when she opened her laptop to study, her fingers lingered over the keyboard, waiting, wishing for a message that never came. Raheel hadn't reached out, not even once. At the mansion, Raheel was a ghost of himself. He tried to focus on meetings, construction projects, digital campaigns, but nothing dulled the ache. Aisha's letter sat on his desk, folded and refolded until the edges wore down. Her words rang louder than any business call. "You saved someone your wife once believed in. Maybe it's how she's still changing lives. Through you." For the first time in years, he visited Zara's grave. It was late, quiet, the city noise a distant murmur. He knelt by the headstone, fingertips, brushing the name he still couldn't say out loud without flinching. "You'd have liked her," he whispered. "She's like you, brave, stubborn, smarter than I ever was." His voice broke. "But I pushed her away, because I was afraid she reminded me of you." A gust of wind answered him. He stayed a while longer, until the stars blurred through, tears he didn't wipe away. A week passed, then another. Aisha was walking home from tutoring when it happened. A dark sedan pulled up beside her, windows tinted, engine humming low. She froze. The window rolled down. Mariam's face appeared, sharp as ever. "He's not the same since you left," she said flatly. "He won't say it, but he checks your old room every night. Thought you should know." Aisha didn't reply. Mariam opened the door. "You didn't manipulate him. I see that now. But if you ever cared about him, come talk to him before he drowns in his own silence." Aisha hesitated. She didn't know what terrified her more, that Raheel had forgotten her completely, or that he hadn't. That night, she stood outside, the Khan estate again, same gate, same lantern light pooling on the steps, but everything felt different. She knocked. The guard blinked. "Madam?" She swallowed. "Is he home?" He nodded. "He never leaves anymore." The hallway felt longer than she remembered, quieter. She found him in the study, seated in the same leather chair, holding the photograph she had once found. He looked up, and for a long moment they just stared at each other. Two people carrying too many unsaid things. Then softly, "I read your letter every day." Her throat tightened. "Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because I needed to know if I was angry or afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That I'd fall in love with you. Not because of who you are, but because you remind me of who she was." Silence. Then Aisha stepped forward, slow but certain. "I'm not her, Raheel, and I never will be. But I carry her lessons, just like you carry her grief. Maybe we don't need to fight it. Maybe we just need to grow from it." He stood up, eyes never leaving hers. "And if I said I don't want to lose you again, then don't." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't want to save you, Aisha. I want to stand beside you as you save yourself." She reached for his hand. "Then walk with me. Not ahead, not behind. Just with me." He pulled her close, not as a savior, not as a billionaire, but as a man rediscovering hope in the most unexpected place. In the following days, Aisha moved back, not as a maid, but as a student. Raheel converted one of the guest wings into a private study lounge for her, filled with whiteboards, bookshelves, and peace. He never hovered, just supported. Her entrance exams arrived. She sat in the exam hall shaking, but she remembered what Raheel once told her. "Talent like yours doesn't belong in a broom closet," and she let that guide her. Weeks later, she got the results. She had ranked in the top 3%. She didn't run to tell him. She walked, straight-backed, eyes alight. When he opened the door, she simply held up the result letter and said, "Looks like the girl with the mop made it." He laughed, openly, freely, and for the first time it felt like the future wasn't something they feared. It was something they were building, together. The day Aisha held her university acceptance letter, everything she had once feared now felt smaller than her belief. Smaller than the aching memories of washing dishes with blistered hands. Smaller than the sleepless nights spent translating engineering equations under a flickering bulb. And smaller than the fear of her truth, pushing Raheel away. Because he hadn't run, he hadn't pulled away. He stood there, still, steady, like a tree that had weathered the storm and decided, To grow again, anyway. The celebration wasn't grand, but it was sacred. Raheel invited her father, now recovered and walking slowly with a cane, to dinner. It was the first time Aisha had seen her father smile without sadness behind his eyes. Raheel sat beside him, respectful, quiet, never once trying to impress, just present. As they sat around the table, her father placed his frail hand on hers and said, "I failed you for years, Betty, but you still rose." And when he looked at Raheel, he added, "She was never waiting to be rescued. She just needed someone who saw her." Aisha blinked back tears. Raheel looked down, and when his eyes met hers again, there was something new there. Pride, yes, but also something quieter. Love that didn't need declaring. It just lived. But life, as always, didn't stay quiet for long. Raheel's board of directors called an emergency meeting. Rumors had spread in elite circles about the billionaire mentoring a former maid, funding her education, housing her under his roof. Investors weren't pleased. They framed it in clean clinical terms. Reputation risk, public perception, optics. But the words were sharp with judgment. One of the oldest board members said, "Raheel, you've always been respected for your logic. Don't lose credibility over sentiment." Raheel didn't speak for a long time. Then he stood and said evenly, "If helping someone rise is a scandal, then let it be one I'm proud of." The room buzzed with dissent, but he walked out. He found Aisha that evening in the garden, notebook in hand, barefoot in the grass. She looked up when she saw him and immediately sensed it. Something had shifted. "What happened?" "They want me to stop supporting you," he said quietly. "They say it's bad for business." Her breath caught. "Then maybe I should go." "No," he said firmly. "This is your home too. I won't let fear make our choices for us. But if you lose investors, then I rebuild, like you did. We don't rise by stepping over others. We rise by lifting each other." Aisha didn't answer. She only reached out and held his hand tighter than before. But the pressure didn't end there. A week later, a journalist showed up. Outside the estate, camera flashing, asking if the rumors were true. "Are you dating your maid?" Raheel didn't flinch. "She's not my maid. She's an engineer in the making." The next day, the tabloid headline read, "Billionaire's forbidden love, Maid turned miracle." It went viral. And with it came online cruelty. Trolls called her a gold digger. Socialites called her manipulative. Anonymous accounts sent her threats and messages dripping with venom. Aisha tried to ignore it. But one afternoon, she found her name trending on social media with fabricated screenshots, false messages implying she had pursued Raheel for wealth all along. That night, she locked herself in the study and didn't speak to anyone. Hours passed. Then Raheel knocked. When she didn't answer, he sat outside the door and began talking anyway. "They don't know you. They never saw you study through the night. Or how you cry when you pass a street kid selling roses. Or how you gave away your own winter coat last December because someone needed it more. I know you, and that's enough for me." Silence. Then slowly, she opened the door. Her eyes were swollen, but her voice was steady. "I thought I was strong enough, but I don't know how to fight the world outside." He cupped her face gently. "Then don't. Just live. Let your truth be louder than their lies." The next day, Aisha posted a video, her first ever. No makeup, no script, just her voice and her story. She shared how she once cleaned homes to survive, how she studied in secret, how she almost gave up, and how Raheel's belief gave her courage. Not money, not privilege, but belief. The video wasn't meant to go viral, but it did. People, especially girls from rural towns, slums, low-income backgrounds, began sharing it, thanking her for speaking. Within 72 hours, her video had over 3 million views. Suddenly, she wasn't just a name in someone else's story. She was telling her own. A few universities offered her partial scholarships. A women's tech foundation reached out. A podcast invited her to speak. But the moment that truly shattered her was when she received a handwritten letter, delivered, from Bahawalpur, by the sister of her old literacy teacher, Zara. She always believed you'd do something great. She used to say, "Some girls have stars inside them. They just need the night sky to show." Aisha wept as she read it. Raheel found her sitting by the window later, the letter clutched in her hand. "I think," she said, voice trembling, "that I was never meant to hide." "No," he replied. "You were born to shine." And then, for the first time, she leaned in. Not with fear, not with hesitation, but with trust. And when he kissed her, it wasn't the start of a fairy tale. It was the continuation of something real, messy, brave, earned. Not because he gave her a better life, but because she had claimed it for herself. Rain had returned to the city, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet drizzle that lingers on rooftops and windowsills like a memory. Aisha stood beneath it, barefoot in the garden, palms open to the sky, as if letting the final traces of her past be washed away. She had just submitted her final paperwork for her first semester at the top engineering university in the country. Full scholarship. Media attention had come and gone. So had most of the noise. What remained was real life. And real life was beautiful in its quiet strength. Raheel watched her from the porch, his arms crossed loosely. His company had taken hits. Some investors left, but others stayed. Those who believed not just in buildings but in purpose. He'd restructured everything, trimmed luxury, redirected funding to start an education initiative called Zara's Light, dedicated to providing scholarships to girls from underprivileged backgrounds. Aisha's story had become its foundation, but she insisted on no credit. "I'm not the symbol," she said. "I'm just the proof that symbols aren't needed when support is real." In the months that followed, their life shifted to something quieter, more grounded. Aisha moved into a modest apartment closer to campus. Raheel helped her set it up, but he never imposed. Their relationship wasn't a spectacle. There were no lavish gifts, no viral declarations. Just late-night phone calls, shared dinners, handwritten notes slipped into her textbooks that read things like, "Don't let circuits confuse your magic." When she had her first breakdown during exams, he listened, not with solutions, but with silence and presence. Then one night, as she returned home from the library past midnight, she saw him sitting on the stairs outside her door. Suit crumpled, tie undone, but his eyes steady. "I lost the board today," he said without drama. "They voted me out." She knelt beside him. "I'm so sorry." He shook his head. "I feel free. For the first time in years." She searched his face. "So what now?" "I build something new," he said. "Something with meaning. Maybe with you." That night, he didn't sleep in a mansion or a penthouse. He slept on her old woven rug, under a borrowed blanket, beside the girl who once scrubbed floors in his home. And for the first time, he didn't dream of his past. He dreamt forward. Years passed. Aisha graduated top of her class. Not because she was a billionaire's partner, but because she had been a survivor long before she became a student. She went on to start her own nonprofit that taught coding and engineering to girls in slums and rural villages. They called her Engineer Baji. She wore the title like armor. Raheel, after a quiet 2-year sabbatical, launched a new company, one that built low-cost smart housing in flood-prone areas, designed using Aisha's ideas. He kept a low profile, rarely attended events. When asked why, he simply replied, Legacy isn't made in boardrooms, it's made in people. And yet, it was a letter that changed everything again. It arrived from a girl named Sana, age 13, from a desert village. She had seen Aisha's video 4 years ago. Her village had no internet, but a teacher showed it through a solar-powered tablet. Sana had written, "I don't know you, but I want to be like you. I want to make machines. I want to fix water pipes and stop my mother from crying every summer when the tank runs dry." Aisha wept when she read it, then packed her bags and went to find her. 2 weeks later, she returned with photos of Sana and her classmates sitting in the sand with makeshift laptops. Raheel asked what she planned to do. "Build a tech school there," she said simply. "Real classrooms, real dreams." "I'll fund it," he said instantly. She smiled. "You'll teach the business side, I'll handle the rest." He laughed. "Deal." That December, they stood before a crowd of young girls and village elders, cutting the ribbon of the Zara Academy for girls in STEM. No press, no headlines, just lives changing quietly. After the ceremony, Raheel took Aisha's hand beneath the shade of an old tree. "I used to think I saved you," he said. She looked up at him, eyes soft. "No," she whispered. "We saved each other." That night under a velvet sky, she whispered her answer to the question he'd never asked aloud. "Yes," she said quietly, pressing her forehead to his, "whenever you're ready."